Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of wild shifts, exploring a band's typical sound and something that's a bit of a departure from that. Yesterday we looked at the number 12 Looks Like You with the track Jesus and Tori. Today we're going to be looking at Empty Calm to see how they juxtapose their rather traditional mathcore sound. Let's dive into it. So we have a 13 beat phrase. 13/4 is what I'm counting, so probably a bar of 6 and a bar of 7. Really beautiful though. A lot of space to breathe on this track as well. It's really interesting, as beautiful as this is, it's not relaxing. We'll get into that a little bit in the analysis. It really is about the nuance in this. Well, to say that was unexpected. So it's a gorgeous song. It has some really nice classical guitar inspired ideas here, little flourishes all around the place, which is interesting because they work both within the classical guitar context and also within mathcore, though more specifically I would say math rock. Um, this sounds like something that probably should be on multiple instruments, but is most likely just a couple of people. In fact, I think our main guitar line that we heard in the intro and outro there was one person with multi-finger tapping going on, just a real strong display of chops. At least that's what it sounds like to me, given the timbre of all of the notes. They sound like they're all coming from a single instrument, although I suppose my idea that it is a single person using multiple fingers doesn't necessarily have to be true. It could be multiple people all playing on a single instrument as well, which, no matter how you spin it, it is impressive. There's a lot of logistics that go into multiple people playing on a single guitar that, while it takes away from the spectacle of one person playing all these lines, there's another spectacle to it of all these people trying to get their hands into places and syncing up with each other. So, regardless of how that goes, it's an impressive feat. Um, but yeah, so there's like this classical guitar thing going on, not only just in the way it's played, where they're putting these little flourishy lines, how they're picking the guitar, but also in the harmonic element as well. Many of the chordal lines throughout, or sorry, many of the melodic lines through here are following chord progressions that kind of come from classical. I think most of it feels rather modern mainstream. We're not drifting too far into like Renaissance music and really aiming for or even Baroque with some of our chord progressions. It's all very modern, but like I said, I feel like a lot of it comes from a classical influence more so than a modern one. Although I suppose it could just be modern classical too. So there's always that. I tend to forget that modern classical is a thing. Um, but yeah, so it's just really neat to hear this side of them because yesterday when we checked out Tori and sorry Jesus and Tori, it was a track that's just completely atonal, chaotic. Chord stuff is all weird all the time, going for dissonance constantly. Just a really noisy track overall. And this is the total opposite of it. Very organized, working within singular harmonic ideas. Um, just really going for a sense of cohesion on every level. And then when we bring in the bass line and the second guitar, in the middle of the track, and they do introduce a bit more tension in the harmonic structure. It's still not going for dissonance; it's just going for tension, and it's some really gorgeous lines in there. Counterpoint between three instruments, but also the harmony, the key notes. Even though they're doing different things, they're all lining up on these really specific triads that keep points through the line. I mean, it is just it's beautiful writing. That's not a word I'd use for most of the number 12 looks like you, but it is gorgeous from top to bottom. Um, and just really emotive too. And so that takes me to, well, I guess just real quick, I want to touch on something, and that's their time signature. This is the part that feels really mathy to me as well, aside from the fact that I think there's a lot of multi finger tapping going on in here. We opened up on a 13/4, which I think most people probably write as a bar of 6 and a bar of 7 because that's what it feels like. We have a bar of 6, and then on beat 7, we restart the idea. There's a little break there, and we start the idea over again, and it just ends differently. So it does take up 13 beats in quarter notes, 13 quarter notes, I should say. But I don't know if writing it as 13/4 would make a lot of sense. Plus, your bars are going to be huge, and that's not always great. Really, you really have to know who's reading your music at that point if you're not the performer as well and know what works best for them. Um, but yeah, so there's oddity there that works. I mean, it carries over some of their mathcore side. And the neat thing is that it doesn't ever really feel like it. And now that I think about it, I don't remember bringing up odd time signature stuff yesterday either. And yeah, they have a way of just bulldozing past, which is a weird word for this one, but I think it's still accurate. Just kind of bulldozing past time signature changes or odd meter components. And so you kind of feel that things are off, but you don't ever really get to that point where you're like, what just happened? And so it's felt, but it's not apparent. And I think that's really important for their songs to not make them feel juddery or rigid, even. And it helps them flow a little bit, even though, like I mentioned yesterday, they don't have a lot of cohesion to their tracks. They still kind of flow. And I think part of that is that despite the time signature changes, you don't ever really notice them. And I think it's really interesting to have something so eclectic and chaotic as this band likes to play, but still have these really smooth meter shifts. And in here, you know, after I noticed the 13, there were a couple other times I was like, oh, what's going on here? And I figure out the times, oh, okay, we're in 13 again. Other times, like, okay, we've kind of moved to something that feels 4. I'm not too sure. We'll move out of it before I really get a strong read on it. But, even within the 13, though, we have the 6 and the 7 alternating. And if you don't look for it, you might not even notice it. They do a really good job of kind of blurring the lines a bit. And here, it's almost like at the end of the 7, it almost feels like a fermata, like a ritardando, slowing things down just a little bit before restarting. And so it doesn't really feel like it should be 7. It feels just like a really long 6. And I think that's part of it. It feels like it's constantly 6/4. It's just at the end of every other bar. We have a little bit of a ritardando that stretches things out. You don't notice it's actually an entirely extra beat. I wonder if they do that often. Because like they also have like the weird tempo stuff that we checked out yesterday. And maybe that's just part of covering up the oddities of the meter. I don't know. I gotta dig more into this group. It's not my cup of tea, but the more I listen, the more fascinated I am by them. Anyways, the last thing we have to talk about here is just feeling, vibes, emotion. What's this telling us? And it's called Empty Calm, and I consistently have called this track beautiful, but I have not used the word relaxing, and it's because it's not. There is tension throughout all of this, whether it's the asymmetric time signature or those little flourishes that kind of make the song feel like they're speeding up at times, like it's really anxious. When the bass comes in, I mentioned there's a bunch of tension in the counterpoint in the middle section there, and even at the end, we almost finished up the song. It was the second to last section with just this rising pitch. It just kept going up and up and up, and then it just kind of quit. And I actually thought the song was over, and I was like, wow, talk about a lack of resolution. Just keep raising this tension and then just end the song. But then we actually bring back our A section that leads into its own irresolute finale. But yeah, just the idea of rising tension, of anxiety, of unease throughout this track, it's palpable, it's hidden beneath the beauty, but it's always there. This is a very tense track, as beautiful as it is. And see, I find that interesting also. Not many bands would say, hey, let's write something completely gorgeous, show off our chops in classical guitar. But we're also going to play around with tension. We might not actually lean into dissonance. No one's going to be screaming, but this isn't going to be a relaxing listen either. It's going to be beautifully tense. And it almost feels contradictory just because of how rarely we hear it. I don't know what it means. I mean, empty calm could be a lot of things. It's a very vague idea. It's the idea of being in the eye of a storm. I don't know about anybody else, but we have hurricanes here like every year. It's not too big of a deal, but we've had a couple of really big ones, and all you do is hear rain and wind for hours, and then there's a lull. You're in the middle of the storm, the eye of the storm, and it's a calm, but it's not peaceful. You know that you're only halfway through the storm. You got the other half ahead of you. Uh, you know, 5, 6 more hours of wind and rain slamming against your house. Darkness outside. It's a tense calm, and that's kind of what this feels like. But like I said, it's vague too. It could be anything. There's so many situations in life where maybe tensions have petered out a little bit, but the tension is still there. It could be that moment after having an argument when you're kind of kicking yourself. You're like, dang, I really shouldn't have said that. And maybe you're not yelling at the other person anymore, but it's not peaceful either. You can cut the tension with a knife, it's so thick, and there's so many ways you could view this idea of a tense calm, and maybe that's the point of it. Maybe there's nothing they even had in mind. Maybe it was always a vague idea to them. Maybe it makes sense in the album. I don't think I have a more concrete read on it though. There's not enough information to craft anything more specific out of this, but I think they did a phenomenal job at capturing that concept of the tense calm. So those are my thoughts on Empty Calm by the number 12, Looks Like You. Very different, but also it still has some of their hallmarks, and I think that's awesome. This is definitely a wild shift. I'd say that this is the biggest shift we've had all week and the closest to what I was wanting out of this theme. But I find it remarkable that even within this large of a change, that there's still their hallmark sound to it. It's still very much number 12 Looks Like You, but at least in this case, if I was given to this in isolation, I don't know that I'd be able to say, oh, this is definitely number 12 Looks Like You. Whereas, like Baroness, um, on their softer, more rock oriented track, it still felt like Baroness, even though it wasn't sludge metal. Uh, but yeah, they still have their stamp. I'd listen to them like, I don't know who this is. Like number 12, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense. I just mumbled through most of that. I hope you caught it. Um, but yeah, so those are my thoughts. I want to know yours though. Tell me your opinions, comments, perspectives, any of that down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you can find a link to Linktree, which will take you here. You can find links to my music, to the Discord server. You can find ways to support the channel, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps this one up. We still have a special selection today. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow. We're going to listen to our final band, A Typical Sound for Them, that we'll follow up with on Friday as we listen to an atypical sound from them. I don't even know what band it is. It's going to be interesting. You know what? I'll spoil it for y'all. It's going to be Mains. I don't even know who they are. I'm looking forward to it. Anyways, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.